ونصلي ونسلم على رسول الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا مولانا محمد وأصحاب سيدنا مولانا محمد وبارك وسلم صلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا سيدي يا حبيب الله. We are looking at the chapter regarding the ring of the Prophet ﷺ. We looked at how it had an inscription on it and was used as a seal, as a stamp on the letters of the Prophet ﷺ, sent out to various leaders of nations, inviting them to accept Islam. I went through a couple of those letters with you as well, to Kisra, the Persian emperor, and Heraclius, Caesar, the Roman emperor. And we left it at that point where I told you that this letter was delivered to Caesar while he was in Sham. He was in Al-Quds, and there were some people who were traveling from Makkah Mukarramah who were in Al-Quds at the time. Amongst them was Abu Sufyan as well, who had not yet accepted Islam. And there's a very famous incident that took place involving Caesar and Abu Sufyan. It is narrated in Sahih and sound, authentic narrations. So that's something that I think we should have a look at, because it tells you a bit more about the background to Heraclius and the kind of person he was. If you recall, I mentioned to you that Kisra didn't accept Islam. He didn't honor the messenger or the letter of the Prophet ﷺ in any way. In fact, he was highly disrespectful, tore it up into pieces, and as a result, his kingdom was taken from him by his son, by killing him. And Kisra, he, although showed inclination towards accepting Islam, he didn't accept Islam. But I said to you that he did, it was as if he knew clearly that the Prophet ﷺ was in fact the last final messenger. And so this will help to aid that understanding as well, inshallah. So this is something that's narrated it's narrated by Imam Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala in his Sahih. So a sound, authentic tradition in which this incident is about the time after Hudaybiyah, after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, which basically, after which there was a short period until the treaty, as long as the treaty was honoured from both sides, there was a short period where there was actually no fighting and there was peace between the Muslims and the Meccans. And this story relates to that period of time. And Sayyidina Abu Sufyan, he had not yet accepted Islam. He travelled to Sham during that time, and this is the same time, around a similar time, that Heraclius had received the letter from the Prophet ﷺ, and this had been brought to him by Sayyidina Dihya Kalbi radiyallahu ta'ala, as I mentioned last time as well. When he received the letter, he asked his people, he said, can you find out if there's anybody here in Sham, in Al-Quds, or in our locality who's come from Hijaz al-Muqaddas, from Makkah Mukarramah, or from those areas. And so someone who knows this person who's claiming prophet. So the people, they searched and they found out, and they told him that there are a group of people here who come from Makkah Mukarramah. And so he invited all of them and called them to speak to them. And so they went, a few people went from the Quraysh, as well as Abu Sufyan, and they were greeted by Heraclius, and he sat them down, all of them, with him. And he said, this person who's claiming prophethood, who is most closely related to him out of all of you? And he says, Abu Sufyan, who later narrated this incident himself, interestingly, he says that I was sat at the back, and I said to him, I said, I'm most closely related to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam out of all of these people. And so he called me close to him, and while I was in front of him, the rest of the group, he made them stand behind me. So it seems as if Heraclius and Abu Sufyan were both standing or sitting face to face, and the rest of them behind him in a line. And this is a very intelligent move, it's a very clever move by Heraclius. The reason why he did this was, he then said to the people who were stood behind, he said that I'm going to ask this man a series of questions. If you feel that he's lying in anything that he says, if he doesn't give me an answer that's absolutely correct in your opinion, I want you to gesture with your head, I want you to shake your head, gesture with your head, and let me know that he's lying. By doing that, obviously, he was making them respond silently. And it tells you something about the character of the people of that time. That, yes, they may have been involved in many deplorable things, but to be branded a liar was something that most of them would have still considered unacceptable. And especially somebody who, although not a Muslim, but would have considered himself as being one of the nobility and the dignitaries of Makkah and the Quraysh, he would have absolutely deplored being branded a liar. And so this is why this was a very smart move. And he hoped that he would be able to get some reasonably accurate answers from him by doing this. And he even says himself, he says that if I wasn't afraid of these people showing me up as a liar, I probably would have lied. So, it was this sense of not wanting to be branded a liar. And so he says that we spoke with an interpreter to interpret on both sides. And he first of all asked, the first question was, he said, how is he perceived, this claimant of prophethood, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? How is he perceived amongst your people in terms of his lineage? What do people think of his lineage, of his genealogy? what sort of people does he descend from? And he responded, he said he's extremely, he comes from an extremely noble lineage and he's highly respected for that. So he asked them, he said, has anyone amongst his ancestors previously been a king? Right? Any one of his forefathers, his ancestors, were they a king? In other words, has there been sovereignty in his family at any point? And he replied, he said, no, there hasn't. He asked again, the third question, he said, have you ever known him to lie before he claimed that he was a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Has he ever been accused of lying? And he said, no, never. And in fact, the whole truth would have been that he is actually known as a Sadiq and Al-Amin, truthful and trustworthy. But he did answer truthfully. He said, no, he's never been implicated or accused of any sort of lie. So he asked again, he said, those people that follow him, his followers, are they from your dignitaries, from your nobility, or are they just common folk? And he said most of them are common folk, in fact downtrodden people, socially, whom may be considered as downtrodden. So then he asked, he said, the number of his followers, is it increasing or decreasing? And he responded that the number is increasing. He asked, has anyone ever left his religion after accepting it because he's not happy? Right? So has anyone ever left the religion because they've been unhappy at having made that choice after having accepted? And he said, no one's done that. He then asked, he said, have you ever fought with him? Have you had any battles with him? He said, yes. He said, how did he fare in those battles? How did they, what was the result? And he said that, sometimes we have had the upper hand and sometimes them. Which, to some extent, is true. In that, yes, you have the massive victory at Badr, but then immediately after at Uhud, the Muslims did suffer some serious losses. And some huge losses like Sayyidina Hamza radiallahu ta'ala and other martyrs of Uhud. So, although that was a tactical mistake, an error of judgment on the part of some of those Sahaba, I don't want to go into that, it's a long story, which, is never considered as disobedience because it wasn't, it was just an error of judgment. And the Quran says repeatedly that they have been forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so we are never at liberty to raise any objections or fingers at those Sahaba. And the message was learned very quickly and very loud and clear that you follow the orders and commands of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to the letter. There's no need for any kind of judgment where the Prophet ﷺ is given a command to follow it to the letter. But anyway, so based on that, yes, that's there is some truth in that answer as well. Then he asked, he said, has he ever broken any promise that he's made to you? And Hazrat Abu Sufyan, he responded, he said that no, he hasn't. But we do have a treaty that's ongoing, and his reference would have been to the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. So we have a treaty which is ongoing at the moment, at present. I don't know how that's going to pan out. The implication being that maybe he might cheat and lie, or whatever, he might break that treaty because it's ongoing. but any previous treaty or any previous promise that he's made to us or treaty that we've had, he's never broken it, he's never lied. And he says himself, he says in giving the answer, this was the only thing I could think of where I could try to give some kind of a negative spin on what I was saying. And so, you see from here as well, the kind of questions he was asking were very clever as well. They were very yes and no kind of answers. You know, no grey and or middle ground. Yes or no. And so even with this one, he says this was the one question where I had an opportunity to maybe, you know, try and put a negative spin on the answer. And he did that by saying that yes, he's never broken his promise up till now, but we don't know what's going to happen with the treaty that we have ongoing. And so he then asked, he said, before this, has anybody in your people claimed prophet? He said, no. And in some narrations it mentions that Heraclius, he actually asked him, you know, when he said that perhaps, you know, we don't know what's going to happen with this treaty. He actually asked him, he said, why do you actually fear that he will break or violate this treaty? Why? And he said that the reason is because, and in that, everything became exposed and clear, because he had to tell him that the Meccans had actually been the first ones to break the treaty. Because his answer was that my people have helped people against his allies, which was a clear violation of the treaty. So hence they were frightful that there'd be some form of retaliation. And so Heraclius, he actually said to him, that actually means that you're the ones who've broken the treaty first. If he now does anything, this is going to be retaliation on part of your breaking the treaty. So this doesn't, you know, there's no negative reflection on him, because you're the ones who've actually broken the treaty by helping your allies against their allies. You're the ones who've broken the treaty. And so, after this, Heraclius, he spoke again, and he explained his series of questions, and he explained his logic behind asking those questions, or why he asked those questions. It's quite interesting. He says, I asked you first of all about his lineage, about his ancestors. And he said, the reason I asked you this is because prophets are always sent from the most noble lineage amongst their people. So, for those who question the nobility of the parents of the Prophet ﷺ, it seems that Heraclius knew better than them. He says that any prophet is always sent from the best lineage amongst their people. They're always born in the best family. He says, I asked you then that whether his ancestors, anyone had claimed prophethood amongst his ancestors. And you said no. And the reason why I asked this was that perhaps this claim of prophethood was a reason for him to claim back his kingdom. And perhaps he was using this as a front to regain lost sovereignty that his ancestors may have had. That's not the case as well. He said, I asked you about his followers, and you said to me that they are that there are weaker people amongst us. They are those that we consider downtrodden, mainly. They are not from the nobility. And he said, prophets and messengers have always, first and foremost, been accepted by the downtrodden. There's those who, in the view of others, have been weak and downtrodden, that have always first accepted prophets and messengers and always helped them first. And so he says, I asked you then, and the implication there was that usually with the rich and the wealthy, the influential, it's their own status and their arrogance that actually prevents them from accepting first of all. So usually those who accept first are those who are considered to be downtrodden, poorer people, the weaker people. He said, then I asked you that, had he ever been accused of lying before making this claim? And you told me that he hadn't. And the reason why I asked you that is perhaps I thought maybe if he's a liar and a habitual liar, then he's gone from lying about people to lying about Allah. For a habitual liar, that may not be such a huge issue. But you said no, that he's never been known to lie or accused of lying in his life before his announcement. And then he said that, I asked you, and again the hidden implication there was what? That somebody who never lies about other people, how could he lie against Allah? Someone who's never been known to lie and doesn't lie about other people, why would he lie against Allah? He says, then I asked you about people entering into his religion, that has anyone ever left unhappy with having accepted that religion? And you said no. And he said, the reason I asked you this is because this is the true quality of Iman. That once somebody accepts, they never let go. And if someone accepts truthfully and Iman is in their hearts, they don't let go. And that's a reflection of a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ as well, in which the Prophet ﷺ talks about qualities of Iman and faith and attributes that will enter people into Jannah. And one thing that the Prophet ﷺ mentions in that discussion is that leaving Islam after having accepted should be just as abhorrent to you as being thrown into an open fire. Right? You would dislike leaving Islam just as much. And so he said that. He said this has always been the quality of true Iman. But once accepted, people don't let go. And so I asked you about your battles with him. And you said that sometimes we have been dominant, sometimes they have been dominant. And Heraclius told him, he said, this has always happened with prophets and messengers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That sometimes the believers have dominated, sometimes they have been dominated. But he says ultimately the help of Allah and victory has always been on their side. So I asked you about promises and covenants and treaties, and you said that he's never broken any promise or treaty with us. He said one quality of all prophets and messengers of Allah is that they are trustworthy. They don't cheat people. They don't break their promises, and they don't violate their treaties. I asked you if anyone amongst the people had claimed prophethood before him, and you said no. And he said, I asked this because I was thinking that if somebody had claimed prophethood before them, then perhaps he's just trying to mimic that person, or maybe achieve similar kind of fame and status if it had been achieved, or trying to learn from someone else's claims. And you said no. You said no one's done that. And so then finally he asked all of them. He said, tell me what his teachings are. What message does he give? And so they all responded. They said that he tells people to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He tells people to give charity and to maintain ties with their relatives, to remain chaste, to adopt chastity and modesty, haya. And Heraclius, when he heard this, he said, if everything that you have told me is true, and you've answered all my questions accurately, then I have no doubt in my mind that he is the promised last and final messenger of Allah. And he said that I already knew that he was going to be born very soon, because Heraclius was very, very learned in the biblical texts and sources and the Old and New Testament, etc. He was very learned in that regard. And also, he was very learned in astrology. And so he had calculated already, he was anticipating that this was around the time that the last and final messenger should be emerging. So he said, I already had an inclination that the time was near. But I never realized that he was going to be from amongst you. In other words, the Arabs. And just as a common perception was amongst the Ahlul Kitab that the last and final messenger was going to come, and wrongly so, because the Prophet ﷺ and his lineage had been described to them. But over the years, with this succession of almost 4,000 prophets and messengers between Sayyidina Musa and Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, and all of them coming from the same family as well. Right? There were two families that had been chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, amongst them one for kingship and one for prophethood. So all of those thousands of prophets and messengers coming from the same lineage, from the same family over such a long period of time, somehow it had become embedded in their minds that the last and final messenger, or they began to anticipate that the last and final messenger was going to come from that same family and from amongst them as well. And so he said, yes, I was anticipating his arrival, but I didn't know that he was going to come from amongst you, amongst Arabs. And he said that if I had certainty that I was able to get to him, then I would make an effort to do so. In other words, if I could be certain of meeting him, I would make an effort to do so. Perhaps the implication there was that I fear for my life and my kingdom. That if I openly declare belief in him, my people are going to kill me. Or they will at least take my kingdom and throne from me. And so he said that if I had certainty that I could get to him, I would go to him. And I would be with him now. And upon finding him, his words were, he said, upon finding him, I would wash his feet. In other words, I would become his servant. And he said, without any doubt, I can tell you that very soon his sovereignty will expand. Now he used the word sovereignty, but obviously it means it means the religion of Islam will expand and will extend to this very land that we are in now. And he was talking to those people, and Al-Quds, he said, without any doubt, I can tell you that his religion will expand and will reach this city that we are in now. And so that's just one of the incidents that's narrated about Heraclius, and it's a good strong reference from Sahih Bukhari, and there's other narrators who have narrated the same incident as well with some additional information. And there's many other narrations about him as well. But I think that suffices to actually show you how he actually realized what the truth was. And perhaps if things had been different and more fortunate for him, he would have accepted Islam. But he didn't. But what that does mean is that he did treat the Prophet ﷺ's messenger and the message, the letter, with great respect. And the Prophet ﷺ said that by doing this, he saved his kingdom. And so in some narrations it's mentioned that he had the letter, that parchment, put inside a gold tube, which was then passed on in his family from father to son, from generation to generation. That's the letter to Heraclius. So we've already looked at Kisra's letter. Now we've concluded our discussion on the letter that was written to Caesar, Heraclius, Emperor of Rome. The third letter was written to Najashi, or Negus of Abyssinia. And I've already mentioned to you that Najashi or Negus was not a name, it was a title of kings of Abyssinia. And so the first king, who at the time of the Prophet ﷺ had the first interaction with Abyssinia, was the first migration of the Muslims, small number of Muslims that migrated to Abyssinia after the persecution started in Mecca. And if you recall, if you've studied the seerah, you will recall Sayyidina Ja'far radiallahu ta'ala was amongst those migrants, and then the Meccans, they sent people after them to try and retrieve them and bring them back. And they tried to frighten Najashi by saying that, look, these people are rebels. They've rebelled against our gods. They will come here and they will take people away from your religion as well. And then to further try and stir things up even more, they said, you don't even know what they say about Isa alayhi salam and about Sayyidah Maryam. Right? That they don't believe that he's son of God, and they say that he's just he's a human, and he's not son of God, and other things as well. So in order to try and get him rattled up and angry and send them back. But again, this was a wise man, a very intelligent and wise person. And he said, no, he said, I won't decide anything until I've spoken to them. Obviously, he came to this judgment that there's always two sides to a coin, and so two sides to the story. And so he invited the Muslims, and it was Sayyidina Ja'far radiallahu ta'ala who stood there, and he was questioned and he answered. And when he was asked about belief in Sayyidina Isa and Sayyidah Maryam, then he recited verses of the Quran which mention the story of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam. And it's narrated that at that point, Najashi and all of his religious ministers that were around him, they were in tears. And he picked up a very slender, a blade of grass or a twig from the floor, and he said that what you're saying, what is mentioned in the Quran, what you have just recited, and what Isa alayhi salam taught us, they do not differ with each other, even by the breadth of the stick. And so he did actually accept Islam, and then the Prophet ﷺ, if you recall, I mentioned last time as well, that Janazah was prayed as well of one of the kings of Abyssinia. So there's different kings that changed, one passed away and the next one came to the throne during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. The letter that the Prophet ﷺ wrote to him, again, it started Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, من محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم رسول الله إلى النجاشي ملك الحبشة. And from Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم to Najashi, king of Abyssinia. And the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said that you are someone who is inclined towards peace and reconciliation. I convey to you the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I am Ahmad, and I convey to you, or Ahmadu ilayk Allah, I convey to you praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one, alladhi la ilaha illa hu, for whom there is no God other than Him. Wal malikul quddus salamul mu'minul muhaymin, and so on. That continue again using words of the Quran, just like in the previous letter as well. And again, because this King Najashi or Negus, he was a Christian by faith, so the letter is slightly different. You can see the nature of that. And also because of the interaction with the Muslims already, because of his favorable view of the Muslims already, and the Muslims, how they've been treated in Abyssinia as well. We see some of that, you can see reflections of that in this letter. And he said that I convey to you praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there's no God besides Him. He is the King. He's free from all faults and weaknesses. And He is the one who grants peace. He is the custodian. And I accept that Sayyidina Isa ala nabina wa salatu salam is a spirit, is Ruh Allah, is the spirit of Allah, and he's the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala transferred to the pure and chaste Sayyida Maryam radiallahu ta'ala. So you can see the Prophet ﷺ making reference to that interaction as well of the Muslims in Habsha, in Abyssinia. So there's some very interesting subtle changes in the letters depending on who they were written to. And he says, because of this word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, she then became with child, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Sayyidina Isa ala nabina wa salam from a sacred soul, spirit, and He put life into him. The same way that He did with Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam. In other words, just as Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam was created without any mother and father, Isa alayhi salam was born without a father, and Allah placed his soul into him without a father. So again, addressing that question that the Prophet ﷺ had encountered with that delegation that came from Najran, and who raised this objection that, why, if he's not the son of God, then who is his father? That's the kind of line that they took, and the Prophet ﷺ addressed that question in this. And he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created him with His hands as is befitting him. I urge you and call you to the worship of that one God who has no partners, and I call you to join me in helping me in the cause of that same one and true God. I call you to obey me and the Sharia that I have been sent with, and to believe in it. Without a doubt, I am a messenger of Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I call you and all your people and your armies to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I have now delivered to you the truth, and I have advised you. I advise you again to accept my advice and to accept Islam. and peace be upon the one who attains guidance. These are the words that the Prophet ﷺ wrote to Najashi Negus of Abyssinia. Some muhaddithin, some scholars, they say that this Najashi was already a Muslim. He'd already accepted Islam. When he received this letter, he declared his Islam openly, and he sent a response to this letter as well. He wrote a response, sent it with his son and a group of people. But unfortunately, they didn't make it to Madinah Munawwarah. They obviously had to cross the sea, travel by ship, by boat, and they encountered some difficulty on water, and they drowned. But they didn't make it to the Prophet ﷺ. He had actually responded, and he'd written about his acceptance of Islam in that response. And so this Negus, this Najashi, also died within the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. As I mentioned earlier, he is the one whose janazah the Prophet ﷺ prayed. And we've had this discussion last time about the Ghaibana Namazi janazah, or the janazah when the body is not there. I've explained to you that is a khasa, a special quality attributed to the Prophet ﷺ, or that by way of miracle that body was brought in front of the Prophet ﷺ. So that concludes our discussion on those letters. There's a couple of short ahadith remaining in this chapter, so I think it's appropriate if we finish the chapter and then we can conclude with that for today. Sayyidina Anas bin Malik radiallahu ta'ala, he narrates the next hadith in which he says that the Prophet ﷺ used to wear a ring, and when he went to Baytul Khala, when he went to relieve himself, the Prophet ﷺ would remove his ring. So this is why the ulama have said here that if you have anything on your person, a ring, an amulet of any kind, anything where there's name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or any other blessed words which are clearly visible and open, they should not be taken into the Baytul Khala, the toilet, or when you're relieving yourself. And the ulama have said that in terms of if it's an amulet that is enshrouded with cloth or whatever, or if it's something that's deep inside your pocket, for example, if it's not visible, then that there's not an issue with that. But clearly, it shouldn't be anything of that nature which is visible as well, taken into the Baytul Khala. And Sayyidina Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu ta'ala, he narrates the last hadith in this chapter. He says that there was a ring, the Prophet ﷺ's ring stayed in his blessed hand until he departed, and then this came to Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, then it came to Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala, it then came to Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala, and it was during his time that it fell into a well and it was lost. On this ring, was the inscription Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is that special ring that was the seal of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that was lost during the time of Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu. Evidently, this ring, it's mentioned that there was a Sahabi by the name of Sayyidina Mu'aykib radiallahu ta'ala, who had this duty, responsibility and honor of keeping the ring of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam safe. He did that during his time, then also in the time of Sayyidina Abu Bakr, Sayyidina Umar and Sayyidina Uthman, he retained that responsibility. It's mentioned that one day Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu, he was at this well doing wudu, and this ring, now there's both narrations. One mentions that Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu, while he was taking it, it fell out of his hand. The other one mentions that while he was giving it to Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu, it fell out of Sayyidina Mu'aykib radiallahu anhu's hand. We have both narrations. The ulama have reconciled that by saying that obviously when you're exchanging something hand to hand, it can go either way. So it can really be ascribed either way. What actually happened was that it was exchanging hands and it fell at that time. So that can be ascribed to either one. And that's how the ring was lost. Osman radiallahu anhu, he did try to retrieve it. He tried very hard to retrieve it. For 3 days, he had people drawing out water from that well and searching for it, but it was never retrieved. And the ulama say that this is when all the difficulties that started in the Khilafah of Sayyidina Osman radiallahu anhu started after this ring was lost. That was the opening to the difficult times that then started during the Khilafah of Sayyidina Osman radiallahu anhu. And it does say as well in that hadith that this was in the hand of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you remember previously, there's a narration from the same narrator, Sayyidina Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anhu, who said the Prophet did have the ring, but he didn't used to wear it. It was only used as a seal and a stamp. And so that is explained quite easily with the wording that is used, that it was in the hand of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Doesn't mean he was actually wearing it. That could be a very simple metaphor for ownership. That it was kept by the Prophet ﷺ and then given to Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq. That's that chapter. The next chapter is about, this one was actually describing the ring, what the ring was like and so on. The next chapter is about the Prophet ﷺ's wearing of the ring. Did he wear it? Which hand did he wear it on? Which finger did he wear it on? And how was it worn? So that's more to do with the Prophet ﷺ's wearing of the ring, not the ring itself. And there's 9 ahadith in that chapter which we will look at inshallah next time. We're up to chapter number 2, third section in chapter number 2, which is about istinja, which is the process of cleaning yourself after relieving yourself. Now, there's some misconceptions here which need to be clarified. First of all, istinja literally is the process of cleansing yourself after relieving yourself. And it doesn't refer to the method or what is used to achieve that cleanliness. There's a verse in the Quran in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commends those who remain clean, very clean. And this was revealed regarding the people of Quba, which is the first settlement that the Prophet came into. That's where the first masjid was built, Masjid al-Quba. And beloved to the Prophet used to visit on a weekly basis, and the Prophet said that anyone visiting Masjid al-Quba and praying to Nawafil there will receive the reward of an accepted, complete Umrah. And so these people around that locality of that Masjid al-Quba, that locality of Quba, the Prophet then went to them and he said to them, why has Allah revealed this about you? Why is Allah commending you for your cleanliness? You must be doing something different. And obviously this, more than anything else, this was for the benefit of the Ummah, to show why they'd been commended so that people could adopt that practice as well. And so they responded, initially they said, we don't do anything out of the ordinary. And then eventually they realized what it was, and they said that when we relieve ourselves, we do istinja, we cleanse ourselves with something dry, which traditionally would have been like a clump of earth or something similar, but we also use water as well. And so they adopted both methods of istinja, using something dry and also using water as well. And they were commended for this in the Quran. And it just shows you, generally as a concept, this shows you the emphasis that's placed on cleanliness in Islam. And it's really interesting. If any of you have an interest on history, if you're keen on history, then there's a really interesting exercise that you can do is look at levels of personal hygiene 1400 years ago in other parts of the world, and then look at what Islam and the Prophet ﷺ was teaching 1400 years ago. It's rather interesting. You'll find some interesting revelations there. And so there's a huge emphasis on cleanliness, and this is all part of it. The misconception is around using water, and it is something that needs to be clarified. Using water or a pure liquid is only necessary if the impurity that is leaving the body has spread around its exit by the size of 1 dirham. And that size, I explained to you last time as well roughly what it was. It was in the last section. And the author takes the view that it's about 3 centimeters squared. In that case, it becomes necessary to remove with water or pure liquid, whatever is available. Beyond that, the purpose is to achieve cleanliness, to remove all traces of impurity. And so therefore, straight away, what we can understand is that using water is not always necessary. It's a good thing. Those people of Quba were commended for it, for practicing that regularly, but not always necessary. So therefore, it is possible that these mildly funny horror stories that you hear about absence of lota and things like this, that it might be possible that you're not in a situation where it's necessary. And that's a judgment call for everyone to make for themselves. But if you know that information, then you can decide on that yourself. And perhaps you don't need to put yourself through that kind of stress. The other thing is, in terms of, like I said, no question about it. It's afdal and it's far superior, and there's reward obviously associated with it. If it's something that Allah commends in the Quran, then it's something worthy of accepting, no doubt. But the legal ruling is something separate. That doesn't talk about what's superior and what's best. It talks about what's legally required. Secondly, there seems to be a common misconception that you have to do, your wudu begins with istinja. And believe me, that is quite a common misconception. To the extent that if you need to refresh your wudu, and you exit a gathering to refresh your wudu and you go straight to the sink and start making wudu, perhaps some people will find that strange as to why you've gone straight to the sink. Istinja, as I mentioned to you, is a process of cleansing yourself after releasing any physical impurity from your body. If you haven't done that, there isn't a purpose in doing istinja. It's not necessary. It's not part of wudu by any means. And so that's just purely a fictitious misconception. It's a misunderstanding. And so those are the main things that you need to be, you need to consider. And in terms of the next thing is etiquettes of relieving oneself. I'm sure you all know this, but just to run through again, when you're wishing to enter the lavatory, it's recommended to enter with the left foot and leave with the right foot. And this is the exact opposite of entering the masjid. The masjid is a place of barakah. You're entering a place of impurity for the purpose of relieving yourself of impurity. And so the opposite method is adopted. Before entering, so that means don't read this inside. Before entering, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-khubthi wal-khabaith. So Allah, I seek your refuge from impurity and that which is harmful. And when exiting, Alhamdulillah alladhi adhaba anni al-adha wa afani. And when exiting means when you have actually exited, when you've left, when you're outside. We already mentioned previously as well, I spoke to you briefly about wudu, the du'as, etc. Not recommended that you be saying anything virtuous inside that vicinity. You shouldn't be speaking at all unless absolutely essential. And so, that's one thing. And general etiquettes, I'm sure you're all aware. No eating and drinking in the facilities, no talking. It's quite strange how people don't. I've been in some situations where I've been in communal facilities inside the masjid, in masajid in various places. It's happened on a couple of occasions. And somebody's inside one of the cubicles and chatting away on the phone. Right, so it's obvious that some people are not aware of that. Not a good thing, not a good place to be talking, not a good thing to do. No talking at all, to the extent that if somebody is looking for you, if someone even calls out for you, or if you need to alert somebody that you're in the toilet, then do so by coughing or making some other noise that will alert the person that you're inside without having to speak. So obviously saying salam and responding to salam is completely out of the question. Any kind of talking is not permitted. Similarly, obviously responding to the adhan or the muazzin and so on. You should not talk unless absolutely necessary. And obviously, another thing as well, try to be as efficient in terms of time as possible. There's a reason for that. Some people have mentioned that by spending too long in the toilet and spending unnecessary and undue amount of time there, you're leaving yourself susceptible to whispers of the shaitan, this problem of waswasa. But anyhow, it is a facility that you should use, and when you're comfortable, leave in as swiftly as possible. And the method, obviously, something I'm sure some of you will have seen. It's come up on social media, and I've now quite a bit as well. A few people have made presentations about it. Apparently, some scientific research as well into the angle of the body in terms of squatting and how that helps to release and completely cleanse the bowels. I assume that's correct. I assume there's no reason to doubt that. And the fact is that it is sunnah, and so where possible should be adopted.